I just want to preface by saying that I wrote much of the sermon that I'm going to give tonight earlier this week, this morning, before that crushing news about the overturning of Roe. Having said that, as I looked at the message of this sermon throughout today, tweaked it a little bit, but I think the message still rings true. Certainly in the days and weeks ahead, there will be more time to focus on specific steps and plans for action, for supporting and caring for each other, for talking about the Jewish values that will animate our work together. Tonight, I want to offer this message about hope. We didn't send just anyone. We sent our best, our brightest, our strongest and bravest and most determined, the best of the best, the hope for the future. We didn't send just anyone. They were the leaders, the judges, the chiefs, the most thoughtful and the most wise. We placed our trust in them, our hope, our faith, our future that awaited us. Our future rested on the shoulders and impressions of these 12 scouts, sent to survey the land that God had promised us. There was so much longing and wonder as they set off on their journey. What would they see? Who might they encounter? What dangers lay ahead? Was all that was promised to us true? We were so close now. Could it be that our journey was almost complete? They were gone for 40 days. And when they returned, they went straight to Moses and Aaron, in front of all of us, gathered there to hear what they had found. This is what they told him. We came to the land you sent us to. It does indeed flow with milk and honey. Phew. However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakites there. Amalekites dwell in the Negev region. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites inhabit the hill country. And Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But then Caleb stood up and urged us, "Let us by all means go up, and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it." But again, the others who had gone with him insisted, "We cannot attack that people, for it is stronger than we. The country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are men of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. And so we must have looked to them." And just like that, a wave of doubt and fear washed over the entire camp. All hope was lost, the future bleak and uncertain. No, not uncertain, impossible. It was all for nothing. All the longing, the countless days traversing the desert, running away from crushing oppression in Egypt, all for what? For this? For certain death that laid ahead? Again, Caleb, now with Joshua, urged a different path forward. If God favors us, God will bring us to this land and give it to us, a land that is flowing with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against God, and you do not fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their shade has turned from them, and God is with us. Do not fear them. Despite Caleb and Joshua's pleading, despite their careful encouragement and their message of hope and commitment to faith, they could not change the minds of the Israelites. They admitted the road ahead was difficult, dangerous, but not impossible with faith in God. The other 10 scouts had spoken. The task was too great, the battle ahead too dangerous. Even the land devoured its inhabitants. And with that, the Israelites seemed to give up. They abandoned hope and cried out in fear, crying out that they would have rather died in Egypt. On hearing this dissolution of faith, Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in front of the gathered assembly, in a gesture of submission to a greater power. Or, according to biblical scholar Robert Alter, a desperate attempt by these two leaders to plead with the people not to undertake the disastrous course that they had just threatened. But it's no use. The 10 scouts, representatives of their tribes, had made up their minds, and so too had the Israelites. God, too, appears wounded by the Israelites' lack of faith. God admits to Moses a desire to completely wipe them out for this sin, leaving only Moses alive. Moses pleads with God not to act on this threat of complete destruction. He appeals to God's compassion and mercy, which seems to work. God agrees to not destroy the Israelites, but as a punishment for the people's rebellion and for siding with the 10 scouts and doubting the path ahead, God condemns this generation to die in the wilderness, never to enter the promised land. This generation will be doomed to wander for 40 years, and Caleb and Joshua will be the only two from this generation to enter the land. Instead, it will be the responsibility of the next generation, the generation born in the wilderness, who never knew slavery, who will take the promised land. Last week during Torah study, as we were discussing an earlier instance of the Israelites complaining and their yearning for the way things were back in Egypt, someone raised an interesting question about this punishment the Israelites receive after this report of the scouts. Why was this the reason that the Israelites are doomed to wander through the desert? What is different about this moment compared to the other incidents of the golden calf or complaining about water or food at other moments along their journey? As I read through this portion, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the Israelites' greatest sin here is that they abandoned hope. Bible scholar Aviva Zorenberg points out that the Israelites had no faith, despite God's many assurances that the land was good and would be theirs. Earlier in the narrative, when the wells dried up after Miriam's death, the people were fearful and called to God from a place of uncertainty. When they feared that Moses had abandoned them, they built a golden calf, mainly as a familiar way to engage with God and pray for Moses' return. When they grew tired of the manna God provided each morning, and the Israelites lusted for unlikely memories of eating fish and meat and cucumbers in Egypt, they complained from a place of internalized trauma. But here, on the border of the promised land, they refused to accept the possibility of hope, to imagine the glimmer of success, and they gave up. Hope, as it turns out, is one of the most foundational elements we have in Jewish tradition. The ability to hope in the midst of terrible tragedy has sustained our people for millennia. Indeed, there is something fundamental not just to our Judaism, but to our very humanity about hope. Historian Yuval Harari, in his book *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, argues that one of the distinguishing features that moved the evolution of early Homo sapiens forward was their unique ability to imagine and articulate a vision of a world that could be drastically different from reality. It creates the possibility of beginning to work together towards bringing that vision about. It's important to note that hope is not just a passive stance. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, explaining the difference between hope and optimism, writes, "Optimism and hope sound similar, but they are quite different. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that if we work hard enough, we can make things better. Between them lies all the difference in the world. Optimism is a passive virtue, hope an active one. It needs no courage, only a certain naivete to be an optimist. It needs a great deal of courage to have hope. The prophets of Israel were not optimists. When everyone else felt secure, they saw the coming catastrophe, but every one of them was an agent of hope. Jews were a people of hope. By discovering the God who created the universe in love, they became the first practitioners of hope. No Jew who knows his or her history can be an optimist. We have seen too many great civilizations, ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, medieval Spain, and pre-war Germany lapse into barbarism and murderous hate. You don't need to be an optimist to have hope. Religious faith, says Sachs, is not a positive thinking. It is not naive optimism. It is not a matter of seeing the world as we would like it to be and then believing that mere wishing or praying will make it so. God never promised that the world would get better of its own accord. Faith, says Rabbi Sachs, means seeing the world exactly as it is, and yet not giving up the belief that it could be otherwise, if we are ready to act with others to make it so. Faith is realism that has been touched by hope, and hope has the power to transform the world. In other words, we are the descendants of Joshua and Caleb. We are a people who cling to hope, even when the path forward may be the most difficult we will ever travel. The words of Rabbi Tarfon from Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, from over 2 millennia ago, echo a similar sentiment, linking hope and action. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to walk away from it entirely. We are required to engage, to put hope and faith into action, and to do whatever work we must to bring healing into our world. Certainly, today of all days, we find ourselves grasping at how to move forward. Throughout Jewish tradition, the idea of hope is often embodied by the symbol of the Ayelet HaShachar, literally the doe of the morning, but an idiom for dawn. It makes sense. Dawn is a moment of both deep darkness and the slow, almost unnoticeable coming on of light, breaking through that darkness. There is a fragility in this liminal in-between moment. It can be full of insecurity and uncertainty. But if we hold on to hope, if we remain faithful in the sun a little longer, light always breaks through. Israeli poet Amir Or captures this in his poem, 7 Lines for Sunrise. He writes, "And even so life, and even so love. We will yet see the gateway of the heart. We will open up to a world of hope. We will tread again its paths, astonished by its beauty, our spirits clear and tranquil. We will yet see the morning rise. The dawn of humanity draws near." We are the descendants of Joshua and Caleb. We are not naive optimists who expect the world to change without us, nor will we be discouraged by the hard work that lies ahead. We hold on to a hope that inspires us into action. Despite the darkness in the world and in our country right now, the light of hope still remains. We cannot let go of that light of hope. So let's get to work. Continue